ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ray Charles.
Get down on your knees if you have to get dirty. Get out. R-E-S-P-C-T. Down, boy, beats to me. Hit me, bam.
The rhythm was there.
Darling, you sent me. I know.
On December the 11th, 1964, Sam Cooke, one of America's biggest pop idols, checked into a cheap Los Angeles motel in a rundown part of town.
Honest you do. You
He never checked out.
thrill me. I know you thrill me.
In his brief life, Sam Cooke managed to change popular music forever and set the standard for every singer who dared to follow him.
At first I thought it was infatuation, but ooh, it's lasted so long.
One of gospel music's greatest stars, Sam Cooke pioneered the transformation of black church music into mainstream pop.
And take you home. Whoa.
You couldn't have the popular music that we have today without that crossover from the church to pop music. I mean, one of the foundations of pop music as we know it is gospel music.
America was shocked when this child of the church was brutally killed after an argument at the motel. But by the time of his death, he had inspired a generation of singers to turn the church music they had grown up with into the soundtrack of modern America.
Stand by me, and it makes it easy.
Sam opened the door for more singers than you'd ever dream of, because it was an approach to music that we didn't ever think the public would accept from blacks anyhow. He influenced most of us.
This is the story of how gospel became pop and why it took a natural rule breaker like Sam Cooke to make it all happen.
I know, and I'm. Well, you know you make me wanna kick my heels up and down.
On February 25th, 1964, Cassius Clay defeated Sonny Liston in one of the most historic boxing matches of all time. And at the moment of his triumph, there was one man Cassius Clay wanted to be seen standing next to.
Sam Cooke, hey, let that man up here.
He'll be up. No, wait, hold it now.
Let that man up.
He's
Sam
coming
Cooke.
up. He's coming up.
Let that man up
He's
here.
coming up. Now listen, Cassius, hold it.
This is Sam Cooke.
Joe, we see him.
That Clay should wish to share his glory with Sam Cooke was no surprise. The singer was an iconic figure for a new generation of African Americans.
Sam Cooke was a guy who didn't take any crap from people and was someone who really seemed like he wanted to control his own destiny as an artist. That became a really big issue starting in the 1960s about black people controlling their own art. And Sam Cooke was one of these people, one of the first people who really began to show the kind of intelligence and guts to do that.
Well, here with me I have one of the greatest singers here in America, and I would say all over the world, Mr. Sam Cooke. I want you to meet him. Come here, Sam. I got the British press here. Mr. Sam Cooke, as you can see, like me, he's awful pretty.
When Sam Cooke saw Muhammad Ali, he was seeing himself just in a different light, you know. This guy is an original. So when they hooked up, it was just like two twins talking to each other, you know.
Hey, the gang's all here. We're gonna swing as one. Do it again now. Hey, the gang's all here. Join in the fun.
Cassius Clay looks just kind of like, I'm sitting next to Sam Cooke. How can this be? You know, and this is the hero to millions, but he was like a little girl about the whole thing.
We're gonna swing as one. How you like that?
Sam Cooke had a lifestyle that was beyond the dreams of most black Americans. He was a major star, a successful businessman, and lived in a house in the Hollywood Hills. It was everything he had dreamed of as a small boy growing up in Chicago's South Side.
I was 7 years old, Sam was 9. And we talking one day, and he had 12 sticks, and he would stick these sticks in the ground. So one day he was sticking these sticks. I said, man, why you always sticking them sticks in the ground like that? He said, LC, he said, I'm preparing myself. He said, these sticks, I'm pretending this is my audience. He said, like they people. He said, I'm saying to these sticks, so when I get to an audience, I won't be scared to sing. He said, because I'm never going to work in life. So I said, what you mean you're never going to work? He said, I'm going to be a singer. He said, I'm going to have money in my pocket every day.
My baby's coming home tomorrow. Ain't that good news? Man, ain't that news? I'm gonna have her a party at the station.
I would watch Sam put on his short little jacket with black pants, little white shirt, sit on a stool, knock him out. Have not made one step yet. Walk off stage, people still screaming. I said, whoa, where they find this guy at? And every time he would do that, I said, that's magic.
My telephone, ain't that good news? Man, ain't that news? Ain't that news? Ain't that good news? Man, ain't that news? My baby.
He would always say, man, when you go on stage, that's the greatest feeling that you could get. You can't pay for it. He said that whole audience came to hear your sermon.
Ain't that good news? Ain't that news?
By the time Sam Cooke appeared on the Dick Clark Show in 1964, he was 6 years into a successful pop career. But the smooth performer had a hidden history that many of his fans were unaware of.
What did you send me?
Send me, Dick, that was in 57.
Previous to 1957, how many records had you made?
I'd made about, I'd made any popular tunes.
You hadn't made any popular songs, but you had been working in another field, had you not?
That's right, I was doing spirituals at the time.
When Sam admitted that he sang spirituals, his white audience might have pictured a world of kindly preachers and old country churches, as depicted in Hollywood films and in books such as Uncle Tom's Cabin. In fact, the world of gospel that Sam Cooke grew up in was anything but sedate. As the son of a Chicago preacher, Sam spent his Sundays in storefront churches whose congregations would sing until the building shook. It was from this hotbed of urban spirituality that gospel's golden age would spring. By the mid-40s, gospel had become an underground form of show business, existing entirely within the black community. It had its own network of venues and its own stars. At the top of the bill were the quartets. Until well into the 1960s, harmony groups were gospel music's superstars.
Let me tell you, say yeah. Yeah, ain't good to you. Yeah. Didn't you wake you this morning? 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 Yeah. Did you start your own?
Gospel quartets, like the Dixie Hummingbirds, were masters at building tension and bringing a crowd to a climax. Their showmanship, along with the techniques they pioneered, were later borrowed wholesale by groups like the Temptations and the Jackson 5.
You had three parts, essentially. You had the two lead singers often playing off each other. And then behind them would be the backup singers who would take the offbeats, repeat a lyric, repeat a passage. So you started having multiple rhythmic and harmonic elements going on in there, which were ecstasy-making. They were incredibly exciting and could drive a congregation just out of the pews and onto the floor.
The sharp-suited gospel quartets were idolized by black children in the inner city, who saw in their heroes a form of success and sophistication that they could aspire to. Sam Cooke was no exception, and as a teenager, he joined a group called the Highway QCs, and they started singing in churches around Chicago's South Side.
Sam Cooke had a group, and my brother had a group, just young guys. And there would be about 3 groups. They'd all go to this Baptist church. The preacher would let us come in after 11 o'clock service. And Sam's group would sing, Purvis' group would sing, and their audience were just a bunch of little children like us, sitting in the audience eating potato chips. and they were just singing. They were getting a good practice, really. That's what it was, you know.
Sam's particular hero was legendary gospel singer R.H. Harris, one of gospel music's most innovative vocalists.
I remember the day, I remember it well. Yes, save my soul from burning hell.
Harrison had a kind of dignified but extremely intense style. He did what was called yodeling, which was really a leap to the falsetto, and it was a very distinctive thing. And all these kids, like Sam Cooke growing up on the South Side in Chicago, he was an enormously influential figure.
I heard about him. I never knew such message coming down from up above. Lord, this old world of sin, I know longer stand. I asked my mother, how can I know the man? She said, you must be, don't you see, oh Lord, you gotta be born again.
For more than a decade, Harris had been lead singer with Chicago's premier gospel quartet, the Soul Stirrers. But in 1950, he shocked his fans when, at the height of their fame, he left the group.
R.H. Harris gave a great quote which indicated that he had gotten out of, he quit the Soul Stirrers because the morals had just fallen right out of the business. Now, at the same time, many in the business felt that the reason that he left the Soul Stirrers was because there were a number of court orders and paternity suits out against him. I mean, it's noteworthy that almost as soon as he quit, he formed another group made up of former Soul Stirrers and started touring again.
The remaining Soul Stirrers were left without their star singer, but there was a backup plan, and it involved Sam Cooke's group, the Highway QCs.
One of the Soul Stirrers used to rehearse the QCs. The baritone singer, R.B. Robinson. He used to rehearse the QCs whenever the Soul Stirrers in town. But see, all the time, he was grooming Sam for the Soul Stirrers, but didn't nobody notice until years later.
Sam Cooke joined the Soul Stirrers, determined to make his mark. For his first recording session with them, he brought songs he'd road-tested with his old group.
Oh, Jesus gave me water. Jesus gave me water. Jesus.
The highlight of the session was the song Jesus Gave Me Water. Other groups had released versions of this old gospel standard, but Sam's distinctive vocals gave the song a new dimension.
And it was not well, there was a woman from Samaria, came to the well to get some water. There she met a stranger who did a story tell that a woman dropped her pitcher, she drank and was made richer.
You can hear Sam's voice break, you can hear him falter in one or two places, and yet his ability to communicate in a way that was natural, that was easy, that brought the listener in, that was confidential in a sense, in a way that made each listener feel as if he's singing directly to me. This is something you can't ever teach anybody.
And that's what he did. His first hit, Jesus Gave Me Water, was the biggest seller the Soul Stirrers had up to that date. And the rest is history. After that, Sam was gone.
Well, on that woman he had pity. She ran back to the city, crying glory, hallelujah, and did his wonders tell. She left my Savior singing. She came back to him bringing.
Joining a group like the Soul Stirrers meant a life of touring, following a circuit known as the Gospel Highway. Although it has now faded into memory, in the 1950s, the Gospel Highway was as exciting a place to be as any in America, and was trodden by quartet groups, numerous gospel divas, and traveling preachers.
Loving less than water, and it was not in. Well, Lord, that woman left for shower.
We were traveling along the gospel highway, stopping in little cities and little towns, and sometimes having church in the field, sometimes having church in the church, or sometimes just having church in a tent, with sawdust and cheers and people bringing fans and food and all kinds of things.
For all its religious trappings, the Gospel Highway was a form of show business, and the artists' touring schedules were carefully mapped out to maximize their possible earnings.
It meant that you wanted to hit North Carolina and the tobacco states right after the tobacco harvest was in, because then your audience had some money in their pockets. And you could turn out a church and there'd be donations and the minister wanted you there. You wanted to get down south in the winter, farther south, Florida and so on, when people would go down there because of the weather and there'd be people down there with money. And that was all part of the Gospel Highway. It was mapped out to the degree where any given year you could almost tell where a group was going to be, because that month was when there was money in Memphis or wherever it was.
We used to go out on tours down in Mississippi and Alabama, and the program be scheduled for 8 o'clock. People started yelling at 5, because they wanted to get there. On mules in the country down there. They'd be on mule backs. I've seen it. In wagons coming. I've seen that. Because I was there.
The Gospel Highway was where Sam Cooke learned how to work an audience. His good looks and natural charm meant that he became an idol for young performers like Candy Staton, who themselves were just starting out on the road.
What set him apart? He had a smooth voice, he had a smooth deliverance. And in those days, most gospel singers had a gruff voice. They were able to get throaty. They would get, Lord. But Sam was always, there was a woman in the Bible days. He was so smooth with it, and he was like an exception.
Sam was very electrifying on stage. He just had a young approach. I remember him singing this song he called Wonderful. And he'd be singing, he said, wonderful, God is so wonderful. And he'd be combing his hair at the same time, looking in the mirror. And I said, nobody would ever do that, So the old school, the old preachers and deacons and stuff was against it. But he was selling out. The places was jam-packed. It was like you were saying Elvis Presley was coming to perform.
You would think you were in a nightclub because he was good looking. The guy was a hunk. He was pretty. We loved him. Everybody had a crush on Sam Cooke. In the gospel world, they were all in the front of the auditorium screaming with their hands up and trying to touch his feet and trying to touch his clothes. And he had strings of women. When we walk off stage, they'd all run to the back of the stage trying to get his autograph, trying to get a hug, trying to get a kiss, whatever they could get just to be near him.
By the mid-50s, Sam was being joined on the Gospel Highway by other singers, many of whom would go on to make a name for themselves in soul music.
Who shall be able to stand?
The Staple Singers were a family group whose younger members had grown up with Sam back in Chicago. They possessed a unique sound that built on the tradition of old-time harmony singing.
Great day, who shall be able to stand?
It gave us a name that stuck with us for a while, the First Family of Gospel. And that's what when we would go to places, the first family of gospel is coming, the staple singers, you know. And boy, we were gone.
Who shall be able to stand? Thunder will be rolling on that red day. Well, thunder will be rolling on that red day. Thunder will be rolling on that red day. Who shall be able to stand?
There's a different sound that comes from a group that's family related. You know their sound because they have the intonation and the tonal quality that only comes from people that are related to each other. That makes for a great sound musically when you have people that have very, very similar intonations and pitches. It makes the harmony that much tighter.
When you listen to a Staples record, you hear these voices, but Mavis was, of course, the star of the group. Mavis Staples' deep contralto voice is a wonderful instrument.
Oh, sit down. No, 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 no. Sit down.
Oh, please don't make me. People would actually bet that I wasn't a girl, you know. I had to be a man or a big lady, you know. One man said, I bet my whole check that you wasn't no little girl. Because I was a little skinny girl at that. I was short, you know. so they just did not believe the voice was coming from me. Yonder come a little David.
Sit down.
With his rock and sling.
Sit down.
I don't want to meet him.
Sit down.
He's a dangerous man.
Sit down, sit down.
As Mavis and the Staples family knew only too well, life on the gospel highway could be tough.
Sit down, sit down. I can't sit down. Sit down. Oh, I can't sit
Especially in the South, where racial segregation was still rigidly enforced.
We knew where we couldn't stay, and we knew where we couldn't eat.
Place you could stop and get something to eat, but you'd have to go in the back. Segregation.
Service station attendants were always a problem.
We stopped a lot of places to buy gas. Sometimes they would serve us and sometimes they wouldn't. You know, they'd look and see who you are and they judge you by your color.
But the problems of the gospel highway were offset by the fact that the singers were treated as royalty by the black communities they visited.
You knew once you crossed the railroad tracks you were in the black areas, or you could find where you were going without a problem. People would give you the name of where you could go or where you could stay or whose house you could stay with.
I just got to heaven and I can't sit down, servant.
I think it was an incredibly exciting existence. I don't know anybody who was out there on the gospel highway who would not go back to it in a minute. They made good money. They met a lot of people on the road. They enjoyed romantic interludes, which I've never heard any of them regret.
Well, I gave my heart to Jesus. What about you? What about you? Lord,
If your husband was in a quartet group and they were playing large churches where the congregation was 80% women, and you got 4 guys playing to a largely female population, you know, that could make a wife back home in Chicago very worried.
to Jesus. What about you? What about you? You know how well.
If you sing gospel music, you were a saint, whether you lived it or not. You know, you could drink, booze, you could run women, you can chase, you could do everything you wanted to do. But you were okay as long as you stuck to gospel. It is so crazy now that I look at it. Lifestyle didn't go with the song.
What about you? What about you? Somebody tell. What about you? I wanna know.
While the gospel highway had few rules, the one indiscretion that would not be tolerated was the singing of secular music.
What about you?
A performer who applied their gospel training to pop was seen as wasting a talent that should only have been used to praise God.
I feel that anything that you're not actually doing for the Lord is on the other side. That's the way I feel about it.
I wouldn't want to gain the world and lose my soul. I want my soul still to go to heaven.
Not everyone could remain so resolute. By the mid-50s, Sam Cooke had begun admitting to friends that he wasn't satisfied, being forever tied to a touring circuit that led nowhere, except another gig at the end of 1,000 miles of tarmac.
I remember him telling me one afternoon, we got to the auditorium quite early, and we sat there on the steps of the auditorium, and he confided in me that he was getting ready to cross over to secular music, and I was saying to myself, God, he's going to cross over to secular music. What if he doesn't make it? They're not going to let him come back in. So I'm like, Sam, you better know what you're doing.
Crossing over was considered an act of betrayal by many in the gospel community. If he didn't want to alienate his gospel fan base, Sam would need to tread very carefully.
Lovable, my girl, she's lovable.
In January 1957, Sam Cooke's record label released a pop version of a Soul Stirrers hit sung by Dale Cook, an unknown singer whose voice was strangely familiar.
She's so lovable.
Everybody knew that was Sam. It's something about Sam. When you hear one of Sam's songs, you know right away. That's Sam.
There's not another quite as sweet as you. I know I'll always love you. You're so lovable. I know she's a...
Sam tried to deny ever making the record, even telling the Soul Stirrers that Dale was one of his brothers. Nobody was fooled, least of all the gospel audience.
We were on the same program when Sam sang his last gospel program. And, he had made a song that sounded so much like one of his gospel songs. Wonderful, God is so wonderful. And this other song was lovable, my girl is so lovable. And everybody knew it was Sam, He changed his name. He put a different name on that one, And so when Sam got up to sing with the Soul Stirrers in Memphis, all of these little sisters, you sit down, we know that's you. We don't want to hear, we know it's you. And Sam just threw his hands up. He said, that's it.
In May 1957, Sam shocked the gospel world when he quit the Soul Stirrers and left Chicago for the sunshine of California. Among the few things he took with him was a song that would become the first official Sam Cooke release.
This is You Send Me.
Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you.
Although You Send Me appeared on a small independent label, it was picked up by the influential late-night DJ, Magnificent Montague.
I called Sam Cooke to come on down. We sat there, we swapped poetry, we played that record over and over again. It became not a record, it became an event.
Honest,
At first, he played You Send Me through the night. I think he played it 60, 70, 80 times or something like that. When you hear something that fresh, it hits you pretty much like a lightning bolt.
Sam took off with that song. But what made the song so different, they had never heard nobody sing like that. ever. And it was reaching across the board. They had never heard nobody sound like Sam Cooke.
For it to be a major hit, it had to sell to white people. And it did, to white teenagers. There were certainly people who only sold to black people, right? Sam started off selling to both groups, all groups.
You Send Me sold over 1.5 million copies, sending the record to the top of the American pop charts. The simplest of songs, You Send Me was the perfect showcase for the soaring vocal style that Sam Cooke had spent years perfecting on the gospel highway.
To marry you and take you home.
He wasn't the first black guy to sing pop music. I mean, Billy Eckstine sang pop music, and Johnny Mathis was singing pop music, Sammy Davis Jr. sang pop music. But he brought this soulful gospel quality into pop music, but he brought it in a way that was very acceptable and appealing to a crossover audience.
Don't know much about history, don't know much biology, don't know much about a science book, don't know much about the French I took, but I do know.
Sam Cooke's visible success sent a message to the gospel singers he had left behind. The world of pop music was there for the taking.
His crossing over was remarked upon at great length and with great intensity in the church, and by the very fact that he wasn't struck dead the minute he did it, this encouraged many other singers, you know, from Wilson Pickett or, I mean, many other singers, Solomon Burke, to do the same thing.
When your baby leaves you all alone, and no.
Solomon Burke, possessed of a voice full of raw emotion, was one of soul music's early pioneers.
Don't you feel like a crying? Don't you feel like crying? For here I am, honey. Come on.
He had been brought up in the church, and as a child had been known as the Wonder Boy Preacher because of his ability to dazzle a congregation.
I preached my first sermon at the age of 7, and my first orders of pastoring was the age of 12.
By the age of 20, Solomon Burke had signed with New York's Atlantic Records and would spend the early 60s producing hits filled with gospel fervor.
Don't you feel like a cry? Come on, cry to me.
Solomon Burke's a person who said, you know, if I cross over, that's great, but I'm not going to sugarcoat, polish, strip away, do anything to my music. I'm going to present it as is. And if people receive it the way it is, then great. If they don't, then that's fine as well.
I'm so happy to be here tonight. So glad to be in your wonderful city.
His best-known song, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, was lifted straight out of the repertoire of his old church.
That's what we used to raise the offering with. That's what it was. It's the march for the church.
Listen to me.
Same march that we've used for all those years ever since I was born. And I just took it and put the words in. Everybody needs somebody to love. And I need you, and you, and you.
And I need, and I need, in the morning, baby.
I remember the pastors and deacons were saying, you, come on down, you. I said, well, we'll put that in there. It works. That gospel feeling is in all of this music. It's that feeling that just says, release this yell now. release this feeling inside of you, to let people know that you feel these words.
When you come out of the world of gospel, you have an inner feeling about words. Gospel give you a connection, and you can actually put your heart into it. And more times than not, you can more or less make it sound like it really belonged to you and only you.
For the ex-gospel choir boy, Benny King, the title of his biggest hit echoed an old hymn, Stand By Me, Father, that had previously been recorded by Sam Cooke's old group.
I was listening to Soul Stirrers. I'm looking at the lyrics, I'm saying Stand By Me, and I just said, when the night has come, and the land is dark,
and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me.
Stand By Me was just one of many soul classics that directly referenced the lyrics and titles of traditional gospel songs.
Stand by me.
Now, these tunes don't sound like those gospel tunes, but they're being directed in part to an audience, a black audience that's familiar with the gospel tunes that are of the same name. So, you know, the music winds up resonating in really rich ways with people.
Stand By Me for me was a love song that went beyond being a love song. I talked to a lot of guys that's gone to war, that's come home and would stop me on the street and say, oh, yeah, I know who you are, and I know your song. You know, his song got me through Vietnam and things like that. So, whoa, okay. You know, so it has a meaning to people that I never thought it would do.
By me, walk stand now. Stand by.
Of all the black artists making advances in soul music at the start of the 60s, Sam Cooke was leading the field. Producing a music that mainstream America could easily understand.
They like the cha-cha-cha, they like the cha-cha-cha, they like the cha-cha-cha. Ooh, everybody likes the cha-cha-cha. Took my baby to the hop last night, and what to my surprise, when we got there, she hit me with the news.
In 1960, Sam Cooke's broad appeal had landed him a lucrative recording contract with the major label RCA. It soon became apparent to his producers there that Cooke had more to offer than just his voice and his good looks.
My baby couldn't do the cha-cha-cha.
He said, you know, I write. I said, yeah, what have you got? He said, I'm working on a thing. He says, but it's not finished. I said, what does it go like? And he said,
Well, don't you know that's the sound of the men working on the chain gang.
Chain Gang was Sam's first hit for RCA, inspired by the work chants of a group of black prisoners he'd observed while being driven through the South. Chain Gang revealed a new level of subtlety in Sam's songwriting.
Chain Gang was Sam Cooke sending a very coded message to his black audience. He said, yeah, I remember where we came from. I know what chain gangs are about. I'm going to even sing about it.
That's the sound of the men working on.
You would think Chain Gang would be a dark and gloomy song that reflected on the dreary lives of the prisoners, and that's what inspired it. But that isn't the song it is. It's a kind of dream song.
Sam could take a song, but had so much feeling and commitment to it that you would say, boy, if you got a heart, you got to be able to feel that.
Somebody say, that's the sound of the men working on the chain gang.
Chain Gang offers a funny kind of grace that you just would never attach to the subject.
I'm going home one of these days. I'm going home, see my woman.
It's about the woman at home. It's about her spinning out her life, about her, wearing her gown.
That's the sound of the men working.
It's these tiny little things give it a sense almost of escape and escapism.
Chain Gang went to #2 in the charts, and its success showed RCA that Sam Cooke, unlike their other big artists, could be trusted to generate his own hits.
It became clear to RCA that Sam knew something about this market that they didn't know, and they better give him a little free rein. And by the time Sam got to RCA, he had a good enough track record so that they were letting him call the shots.
Outside the recording studio, Sam began to reveal a savvy understanding of the music industry. By 1963, he had established his own music publishing company, had bought back the masters of his early hits, and even renegotiated his RCA contract to bring him eventual ownership of his recordings.
Essentially, Sam, from the time he was 6 or 7 years old, 5 or 6 years old, had the grandest vision for himself. I mean, when Sam buys his first house, he doesn't buy it in a black section of town. He buys it up in the Los Feliz section of Los Angeles with no black families around, with nobody having, led the way for him, but just with the ideas there are no limits on what I do. I'm Sam Cooke. I'm going places.
Sam Cooke's business ambitions also led him to establish his own record label, SAR, over which he had ultimate control.
When he started his own record company, I think that was about financial control, but I think it was more about creative control. And actually, if you look at a lot of the groups that he signed, once he signed, he pretty much signed everybody from the quartet tradition. He signed, the Womacs. He signed Johnny Taylor.
One more time. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Johnny Taylor had been Sam's replacement in the Soul Stirrers and was signed to SAR in the hope that he too could be a crossover success.
Go away. Do you hear what I say? What I say? Give me time, and I'll make you live as long as mine. But
Sam tried to take everybody along with him. If you wanted to make it, and Sam knew about it, Sam would help you make it.
Sam was known to be extremely hands-on as a producer and songwriter, and much of SAR's output had a very recognizable style.
Everybody basically had that Sam Cooke feel somehow. I don't care what artist it was and what their style was. He was still on top somewhere in there in the songs.
I dig this. Tell me, how would Romeo feel if it's Juliet had turned out his advances and played hard to get? He wouldn't have let this bother him, and this I know, because swear that life there's hope.
Johnny Taylor was typical of many SAR artists, achieving only limited success. But Sam Cooke was about to hit the jackpot when his record label gave birth to one of the biggest songs of the 60s. As children, the Womack brothers had performed alongside Sam out on the Gospel Highway. As artists on the SAR roster, their name was changed to the Valentinos, and they were told to write themselves a hit.
I remember Sam telling me, man, we gotta cut something that's got more crossover appeal. And crossover appeal means that's gonna reach the whites. He said, they gotta hear this. So we came up with a song.
My days stay out all night long. She made me cry. She did me long. She had my nose open. That's no lie. Tables turning on me. Her turn to cry. Because I used to love her. But it's all over now.
The Valentinos released It's All Over Now in June 1964 and began to get serious airplay. Everyone at SAR thought that the record had potential. Unfortunately, so did the Rolling Stones, who decided that they wanted the song for themselves.
I was saying, man, I don't want them to record the song. I really don't want them to record it. We'd like to just go on the highway, let them go on and get their own song. Everybody be fine. And so Sam had the publishing. So he has to say, you won't understand it now, you understand it later. He said, I got to let him have the song.
Well, baby used to stay out all night long. She made me cry. She done me wrong. She hurt my nose open. That's no lies. Dave has done it now. I'm done.
And we were riding, going up the charts. And they must have shifted gears, because they took on up.
It's All Over Now went on to become an international hit for the Rolling Stones, while the Valentinos' original version quickly disappeared from the American pop charts.
I was complaining, very upset about it, just very upset about it, man. It just took our song, Brother can't have nothing, you know. And I saw the first royalty check. That changed everything. But I used to hate them, but I love them now.
In his own songs, Sam Cooke rarely strayed far from the commercial. He wrote about boys meeting girls, teenage parties, and lonely Saturday nights.
Let your arrow go straight to my lover's heart for me.
But in 1963, a protest song written by a folk singer from Minnesota affected him so powerfully that he brought it into his act.
Oh, he's called a man. Tell me, how many seas must a white girl sail? Oh, he sleeps in the sand. All the answer, my friend, blowing in the wind. The answer, blowing in the wind.
It's blowing in the wind. Who knows how many roads a man have to walk down? My father knew about that. He knew about how many roads. He's been called boy, you know, even after he was a man, you know, down in the South. See, so how long? He's a man now. He's not bothering you. He's got his own family. How many roads must he walk down before you will call him a man? You know, and Sam, he said, well, this is a white guy, and he's writing songs for us.
Tell me, how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? What I want to know is, how many times can a man turn his head, pretending that he just doesn't see?
Sam Cooke said, essentially, I should have written that song. Or certainly a black person should have written that song. What is that about? And it was a kind of artistic challenge. I also think the fact that it was a hit gave notice to Sam in this progression of constantly pushing the limits. That, wait a second, there's some other stuff you can talk about. If back in the day he could mention a chain gang, and that was a kind of signal, now apparently you could write a song pretty explicitly about civil rights and have a hit with it, make money off it. Well, you know, the door was open, and he wanted to go through it.
Sam set himself the task of writing a black response to Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind. The result would be his greatest composition and soul music's first direct engagement with black politics.
I remember him calling me and told me, say, Bob, I want you to come out, you got to hear something. I got something, this song was incredible, you got to hear this song. He said, I've written a lot of songs, but this is a turning point in my life.
And man, you talking about a song that makes you shiver.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since.
It's been a long time coming, but I know, I just believe a change is gonna come.
A change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know.
You listen to that and tell me that ain't the best voice you've heard?
I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't.
He was incredibly proud of A Change Is Gonna Come. There was no other song that anybody spoke of in which he showed this kind of pride, that he would actually analyze it, go through it, and explain it verse by verse. You know, I go to my brother and ask my brother, help me please, you know, but he knocked me down on my knees and he's explaining that's the white establishment.
Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up.
And at the end of this explanation, he says, you know, I think my father, you know, going to be proud of me for this.
Back down on my knees. Lord, there have been times that I thought I could last for long. But now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Oh, yes it will.
When he finished the song, I told him, I said, boy, this song is eerie. I said, it's like eerie. I said, yeah, man. I said, something feels like death. I said, it feels like something terrible's gonna happen.
Barbara Cook, Sam's wife, said the same thing. It somehow or other, there was a premonition in it. It reminded everybody of death, and it really spooked Sam, and it was a song that he performed probably no more than 3 or 4 times in public.
A Change Is Gonna Come was released as an album track with little fanfare in the spring of 1964. Later that year, Sam decided to make the song the B-side to his next single. The record was in the pressing plant when, on the night of the 10th of December 1964, Sam went out drinking with friends.
We were all sitting there eating, and a lot of girls, when they found out Sam was in there, they come running for autographs, and there was one girl particularly didn't get up and come over, and he was and asked for autograph, and he was, that kind of intrigued him. Then she come over, and then they got him left. And they went up to some little place way up on Century Boulevard, out near the airport. And this is where he was killed.
The precise details of Sam Cooke's death at the Hacienda Motel have never been properly understood. Many fans couldn't comprehend what could have brought their idol to the notorious South Central District of Los Angeles.
Sam had a saying what he said. He said, I was brought up in the hood all my life. You mean tell me I'm gonna be scared to go back to where I was raised up at? And that's why Sam never had no bodyguard, nothing. Sam didn't believe in that. He said, man, ain't nobody gonna bother me, man. He said, I don't bother nobody. I don't need no bodyguard, so what I need a bodyguard for? You know, he said, people love me, they don't hate me. But, you know.
Sam was killed by Bertha Franklin, manager of the Hacienda Motel. Franklin later testified that she had acted in self-defense after an angry Sam Cooke had confronted her in the motel office in an attempt to track down the young woman with whom he had checked in.
And how far was Mr. Cooke away from you when you started shooting?
He wasn't too far. He was at close range.
And how many times did you fire this pistol?
3 times.
And Do you know whether you struck, or did you know you struck Mr. Cook?
Yes, because he said later you shot me.
One of these mornings I'm going away any day now. I'm going to heaven to stay.
The reaction in the black community was to see a conspiracy. And metaphorically, that conspiracy makes perfect sense because, I mean, it's articulated again and again within the community that what happens every time a proud, strong black man gets too much power, he's shot down. I don't think that's what happened in this instance, but I think it's totally understandable that would be the way people would react, and I think it points to Sam's place in the community, to the stature he held in the community, the extent to which people personalized his death and found in it a symbol of racial oppression.
Many thousands turned out to pay their respects to Sam Cooke in his hometown of Chicago, while his funeral in Los Angeles was delayed by nearly an hour because his cortege couldn't make its way through the crowds.
But any day, I know that
I didn't know what had happened because so many great things was happening for Sam Cooke at that moment. Television shows and so many great tours, and we were breaking barriers. And now to lose him, it was our new Nat King Cole, and he was gone.
I knew he'd never really leave us. I knew that when I first heard his voice. And after his death, I knew that even more. And it proves itself to this very day that he just lives on.
Even after he was laid to rest, Sam Cooke would serve as an inspiration and example for countless black performers. Sam's spirit loomed large over Motown, a black-owned record company set up on similar lines to SAR. It could be heard in the heartfelt pleading of Otis Redding and in the soaring cry of Aretha Franklin, who had followed Sam's route from gospel to pop and who always acknowledged her debt to soul music's first real star.
Any day go by that I don't miss it. And he been dead 40-something years. And I still miss him. Because he was something else. Yeah, he was really something.
Next week on Soul Deep, the sound of Motown and how Berry Gordy's persistence with Diana Ross and the Supremes finally paid off. And starting right now on BBC4, a gospel legend, Mahalia Jackson in concert.
You